Okay, welcome to the Baal Shem of Kollel in Sfat, Israel. And pays to mention that yesterday I went to the funeral of the soldier that was murdered by the dastardly, cowardly act of a policeman. I was in South Africa. So their studies in South Africa, they said the police are 3 times more likely to create a crime than the average person. So, Israel gave weapons, and you make peace. You give the fox the key to the hen house, and we have to treat those Muslims that not all Muslims are enemies. There are some that are normal people, but this idea of the West, not the West, of the radical left, of looking at people that want to kill them. And we were mentioning this yesterday, the idea of an appeaser. An appeaser is somebody that basically doesn't have courage. So, it's like Chamberlain. He created peace with Hitler only to get bombs falling on his head. And so people have to recognize that there is such a thing as evil. This lady, friend of mine, very bright guy, so he has a friend, a lady, she's a professor in college, so she would always say to the kids, okay, so the Germans, the Nazis were a very evil group, right? Yes. They're killing children, yes. So she said, so would you then say some cultures are worse than others? And they would say, oh, we can't say it. In other words, there's a nature in a human being to seek unity and peace. But it's interesting because the Torah has a very great clarity where we distinguish between good and evil. And in fact, there are 4 mitzvahs of the Torah. The same Bible that said don't kill people says that if you see A is going to kill B, you have to kill them. And so if you see somebody is going to kill somebody else, very easy for a person, they call it an armchair liberal. You're sitting in your comfortable cushion in Overland Park, Kansas. And what do? You tell people that are defending themselves, stop defending yourself. Why? Because you don't have the courage to stand up. You just want to live in a dream world. And this is a human nature. Anyway, I don't want to go too far into this thing, but the fact is that these people are really just one step away from their own destruction. You see with the letting in terrorists into America, letting in the drugs, the fentanyl, without standing to evil. It's as Einstein saw the Holocaust, said all that bad people need is good people doing nothing. In any event, people that don't have the courage have to step aside. Whether you like a guy like Trump or not, you have to realize that when it comes to defending you, he's the right guy. And but it does seem that the only solution is a spiritual solution, because the psychological reality is that people have this tendency, when they're comfortable, they seek more comfort, and when they're uncomfortable, but the thing is that where's the tipping point? One nutcase with a nuclear bomb can end the whole story. So the only solution therefore is a spiritual solution. And that's what we're going to talk about, the spiritual solution. So today I want to talk about something very important, and that is the idea of serving Hashem. It's very interesting because it's the very last subject. Yeah, pretty much the last paragraph the last thing that I've sent to us, I think was pre-Purim, was l'chaim v'levracha. And the last thing I heard, that the last words that Rebbe said were something like the shiur v'zimna that Rebbe would say a lot. That's what I heard. But in any event, the last paragraph of the Sikha by Yaakov is very significant. The last paragraph, in fact, is a big miracle. That Rebbe edited that Sikha, because every week the Rebbe would edit the Sikha, the whole long Sikha, and that week it's only twice that Rebbe edited what we call the Rosh Dvarim, the highlights of the Sikha. And the Rebbe actually, the very last paragraph, the Rebbe brings down the idea of very famous, speaks about the book by Yikra, book that we're reading, that it speaks about the Odom Ki Yakiv Mikem, a person that offers. So the question is, why does it say Odom Ki Yakiv Mikem, a person that comes close? Literally it means come close, offering carbon sacrifice also comes close, is Mikem Karban Hashem. So if you actually look at the interesting thing about the Torah, it makes a lot more sense according to Chassidus than according to the basic interpretation, because it says the Torah midaberes bel yoyim b'remezes b'tachtenim. The Torah is really speaking about Chassidus, really speaking about spiritual things, and it's hinting to physical things on earth. That's why when you look at the actual text, it works more in Chassidus than it actually works in the physical things. Now, Adam ki yakim became a person that wants to come close, or Adam ki yakim, to be more precise, Adam ki yakim, a person that wants to come close. Mikem Karban Hashem, from you has to be the offering to Hashem. What kind of offering are we speaking about? The Karban Oila, a complete offering. So, it kind of dawned on me today, what is Pshat to Karban Oila? What does it really mean, a complete sacrifice to Hashem? What does it mean that we have to completely sacrifice ourselves to Hashem? And what it means is that we say every day in Shema Yisrael, that we should realize that the whole universe is really Hashem. Everything's Hashem. Very nice. Everything's Hashem. So first of all, why is that so important? Why every single day, 4 times a day, do we say the Shema? Say twice in the morning and twice in the evening we say the Shema. It must be that the Shema is very, very significant. Very significant message. And the message of the Shema is that the only reality, because Shema is the mitzvah of Achdus Hashem. It's not the mitzvah of Hamanas Hashem. The mitzvah of Hamanas Hashem is Anoich Hashem Leikecha. Shema is the mitzvah of Achdus Hashem. What is so important about Achdus Hashem? Because the only reason a person will do something opposite to Hashem is because he thinks that there are other realities. And because he thinks there's another reality, for example, a person that's a child and sees his father as his whole reality, so he won't go against his father, because he knows his father is provider, his father is everything. So it's only when the child sees a negative situation that the child is going to... It's only when the child grows up, and sees a dual situation. I don't know, maybe he sees the government, or maybe now he sees his boss. So his allegiances are split. So this is something that speaks about in the Chovos Halevavos, who's buried here. So that a person who has, let's say, modern language, 2 employers. So there are 2 people there are 2 bosses of a company. So he works for them both. So his allegiance, he doesn't put all of his eggs in one basket. A person that works in is one person. He puts all of his eggs in one basket. So the same thing is, a person has to come to the realization that something the Chovos Halevavos does. There's only one boss in this world. So you say, other people are walking around. That's because they're walking around in an illusion that they are the boss, and someone else is the boss in the world. The truth of the matter is everybody's the boss. And the fact that they're an illusion doesn't take away the fact that the Eibush is the boss. It's very interesting because I think it was one of the Roman emperors who maybe was with Asari Harugi Malchus that they were going to kill the rabbis. Very great man. In fact, the Roman emperor himself wasn't an idiot. So they said, you will kill us, but the time will come that you will be destroyed. And they were right. Rome is gone. So it's an interesting thing, because even when bad things happen to good people, it's very easy to get disheartened. Persons in the Holocaust, think about it. It seems that the Germans are the most powerful race. They are. They're taking over Europe. They're murdering millions of people. And yet, within a couple of years, their whole thing is gone. Communism murders 100 million people. Gone. Rome gone. Egypt gone. Babylonian gone. So the point is, and even today, the whole Western Empire is going to be gone. Everything that seems powerful, black radicalism, gone. Everything's going to be gone. It's all going to be gone. Why? Because it's nothing to begin with. It doesn't have any sense. The whole story of Moshe Rabbeinu is told to go to Paro. It's a very profound story. In fact, Rabbi Jacobson says that every single movement that was like an emancipation movement, because there was a lot of... the Rebbe actually compared what happened to the blacks in America to the Holocaust, which is a very profound statement. It was a very terrible thing. So every emancipation movement always quoted Moshe, the story of the Torah. Very interesting story. But a story about human rights in a way. So, but what did Hashem show Moshe Rabbeinu? It says, Boil Pare, come to Pare. It says that Hashem said that I want you to go to the essence of Pare. So Moshe Rabbeinu was scared. Now you have to understand who Pare was. Pare was what we call Moshe B'Kippur. He was a world emperor. So that person was literally a person who was bathing himself in Jewish blood, literally enslaving millions of people. So he literally did have the power. And yet, Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid to go. And Hashem said, don't worry, I'll show you who he really is. And what did he see? He saw he was hollow. He was nothing. Because we look back at Pharaoh of today, so imagine we lived in his time, we would think he's such a big guy. But yet, what is he in essence? He's just a delusional person. He's nothing. Every Roman emperor, what were they? Nothing. Everyone, they were all nothing. And the same thing is with these delusional characters of today, kings, whatever. They're all nothing. Because they don't really have power. They have power, whatever. They have power. They have put fear into people. Big deal. One little nuke can wipe them out in a second. They're nothing. And so the story is, so what is something for real? So something is, like we said before, something is those things that are beyond things. They are the things that make everything. The essence, Hashem, the will of Hashem, the desire of Hashem. So the story is that once a person realizes this, that everything is really from Hashem. So, and then the only reason there is difference is because there's a choice. Hashem wants you to have choice. So it's not even a question what I'm going to choose. Of course I'm going to choose Hashem. So the question is then, how do I choose Hashem? What does it mean to choose Hashem? It means you have to love Hashem with all your heart. What does it mean, all your heart? It means b'shnei yitzracha, with both of your hearts. So even though a person might be by nature attracted to their wife, attracted to their children, you have to be able to say, number one comes Hashem, everyone else comes number two. Number three, we say b'chol nafshecha, a person attracted to their very own life. You say, no, even so, Hashem comes before my life. And then what? Last but not least, the person is attracted to b'chol ma'amincha, their own wealth. And that's actually very hard in life, because I think often money to us represents sometimes a sense of safety. It's not only a sense of money, it's a sense of our safety. So, the Rebbe once said in a Fabrengen, he said, everyone should give whatever they have in their pocket to tzedakah. Hashem will give it back. There was a guy there, a diamond merchant. He had like $1 million in his pocket. $1 million, 1970 is like $20 million today. He gave it all to tzedakah. So that's b'chol me'idacha. That's the kind of guy. I have a friend that I teach, very interesting guy. He gave. And I spoke to him about this idea of giving everything. The last Sikha of the Rebbe speaks about we have to give everything to Hashem. Now, what does it mean to give everything to Hashem? It means your life should be about helping other people. So a person's life shouldn't be about what can I accumulate. All this stuff of accumulation. Imagine a person's on an island themselves. They wouldn't need a fancy house, they wouldn't need any of it. All you would need is functionality. You need a place to live. You'll be able to. That's all you need is functionality. All imagery doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So why does imagery matter to a person? It's actually a lot of the things that matter to people is not because they want something, it's because they're embarrassed of who they are, and they figure if I have a nicer car, I won't be I won't be as embarrassed of myself. So a lot of what goes on in this world, they call it conspicuous consumption. See it in different communities as well, where people are not brought up with self-image and self-pride. They're walking around with gold, and they have to have a fancy car. I lived in Africa. They're living mamish in shacks, but they have beautiful cars, those that can afford it. Why? And also when they don't know how to manage money, they right away spend it on things and items, because the items that they have is a representation. It's it's a psychological thing. It's trying to cover up their shame. First of all, the shame is wrong. Nobody should feel shamed. You're a human being. You're made by God. You're a beautiful person. So there's no reason that you should feel shame, that you should shame anyone. Anyone should ever shame you. Sort of like the story that the Rebbe Rashab told the Frierdiker Rebbe when he became Bar Mitzvah. He said, don't fool anyone. Don't be a fool, and don't be fooled by anyone. Right? So don't shame anyone. Don't be shamed by anyone, and don't feel shame. Once a person gets to that level, then the world becomes much more of a normal place. The question is, what's the functionality of this thing? And a lot of the younger generation that grow up in a healthier society, they don't have this whole issue. I grew up in America. It wasn't what we would call, like if you go in the olden days, you look at the fancy people or people that had money, built themselves palaces, right? You go to England and all like that. What do you need a palace for? It's a pain in the neck, 10-7. What do you need it? Who wants this? Who needs it? So the point is, it's all conspicuous consumption. It's all about looking. It's about a subconscious thing. The person feels that they're shameful, and therefore they want to be able to rid themselves of the shame. Now, in a certain sense, there's a certain, I would say, it's not necessarily a good thing, but a healthy thing where the person wants to feel proud of themselves. But the fact that a person wants to remove shame is a big problem. Why? Because you're, and many people studies show that everybody's been bullied. So people. Let's see, I have a cousin that's coming from out of town. Anyway, so people see this. They, and even people like Obama and his whole thing and all that narcissism. He's living in a $30 million house, and like these guys in Africa. This is one of the presidents. He built a 20 million rand. So okay, that's about 1.5 million. What the wall around his house? It's insanity. And the point is that where is this coming from? Like, I mean, it's just insane. It's all coming from this, what we would call, and I have a friend, he runs a very big charity in Africa. In fact, who actually gives the money to the blacks? The Jews. They're the ones that are creating the organizations and everything like this. So, but what do these black people, when they become wealthy, what do? They become very extravagant. And why? So he told me, because they actually fundraise a little bit from some of these people. Because it's about kind of removing that shame. They grew up like dirt poor. So a person that grows up with a sense of, let's say, a middle class, but middle class okay with themselves, like the Arabs also. They're building skyscrapers that nobody's using. What are you doing? What are you doing? The answer is that it's all about, unfortunately, I actually feel bad for the Arabs. The Arabs have an internal shame that's going back to the time of Abraham Avinu. Shmuel got kicked out of the house, I don't want to go in, I don't want to shame anybody, but it's a very real thing. I think I mentioned that there was this guy, a former terrorist, that Baruch Hashem, he turned to Christianity, became a lover of the Jewish people, but he still had this. He wrote a thesis on it, a doctorate. He wrote a book, The Mind of Terror. And so I understood this, because I once went through a period of my own life of shame, so I understood the emotion. I actually did a little video where I apologized to him and anything that we ever did to you since the time of Abraham, and it was so interesting because he actually cried. This guy was a murderer. Because that's how deep this thing is within him. It's deep. It's like people don't understand. It's a horrific place for a person to walk around thinking that everybody thinks that I'm bad. Right? And that's what Lawrence of Arabia understood. The Arabs all said it's called xenophobic, I think, where they have a certain shame of other people. There's also almost a hatred of one another. That's why they treat each other. And that's why it's a very big mistake. People in the West, they say, let's say these black people, let's give them power. No, those people are dictators. Like you give an African country to a couple of African people with guns, what do? They become the worst people possible. There's no question about it that even apartheid was better for the black people than the black people for themselves. Even the good black people. Why? Because they don't care about one another. And the worst is the dictators. A guy like Robert Mugabe, these guys he's already not such a bad. Other dictators, the mass murderers, killed hundreds of thousands of people. So the fact that somebody's black doesn't mean he's good. And the fact that somebody's an Arab doesn't mean he represents Arabs. Israel gave Hamas territory. So these people are savages. They're beasts. They're animals the way they treat one another. So they would be 1,000 times better. Well, right now, you have 1 million Israeli Arabs. Why don't they, if they don't like Israel, why don't they go under, they have two countries. They can go under the Palestinian territory, or they can go to Gaza. They can go to, none of them gave up any of them. Why? Because they're a bunch of liars, because they know that these people are evil. So the point is that our job, our mission in life is to give our life to Hashem. Because when we give ourselves unconditionally and understand that we're here as an agent of Hashem, as the light of Hashem in this world, then Hashem has a light bulb. He has a place to shine. And that's all you have to do. I think all you have to do is you have to tell Hashem, that's it, Hashem, I'm ready to do your will. But it means unconditional. Unconditional means you're ready for any mission. It's the hardest thing in the world to do. Why? My father told me, the Rebbe says that Hashgacha Pratis is the hardest avoid, the hardest service of Hashem. Why? Because this is my part. The Rebbe didn't say this, it's just my interpretation, so it may not be right. But I think because every other service of Hashem is structure. Yeah, you got to get up, you got to dive, you got to learn, you have structure. And so the mind it can take a structure. But the hardest thing in life is being a soldier. Why? Because you're never at peace. You're always kind of ready to do the will of the commander. But ironically, that's the only real peace that exists in life. Why? Because a person's real peace is being connected to their truest source, being connected to Hashem, being connected to the purpose of life. And when they do that, then they're really at peace because they're connected to meaning and purpose. L'chaim v'levracha.